They're just evil, evil people who do evil, evil things, and they kill people. You know that they've killed people before? They've killed 9 people before, so killing is whatever. I woke up at 5:30 this morning and knew immediately that I was not going to be able to fall back asleep. I took the extra 2 hours I had that I usually would have been asleep to finish reading The Ritual by Adam Nevill. I have a lot of opinions about it, a lot more than I thought I would when I first started reading it. So to start, the overall premise of The Ritual is 4 friends from college kind of meet up together, reunite after a couple years, and they go on a hike in the woods. It's supposed to be kind of a boys' trip, it's supposed to be kind of chill. All 4 of them have, life matters that they're kind of looking for a bit of a break from, looking for a little bit of a vacation. Things go wrong immediately, right off the bat, and the rest of the book kind of follows everything that happened after things started to really go wrong. So when the book starts, it starts just after Dom has hurt his knee. Hutch pulls Luke aside and is like, listen, man, I don't think we're making it. Dom's in rough shape. Phil's heading the same way. We're not doing well. Hutch pulls out a map and is like, all right, I think we can cut across this little forest right here. See where it's super thin? We'll cut right there. We'll hit the river. We'll go on up. We'll hit a spa. Life will be good, right? And Luke's like, I suppose it is the best option because they still had another, I believe, like day or day and a half of hiking ahead of them. And Dom was at this point just needed to rest. Like he wasn't even going to make it another half day probably, which is kind of funny because he ended up having to go a lot more than just a day and a half. Anyway, so then they venture into these woods. Now, the thing about this section of forest that they go into is that it's established pretty quickly that this is a very old forest. That if there has been humans there, they have not been in there for centuries. That everything is very overgrown. They're having a difficult time getting through. They're struggling to stay in a straight line. The terrain is awful. It's just a very dense forest. They're also wet. It's been raining. They're cold. They're tired. So already morale is kind of low and they're struggling. A couple key things happen in this forest. First night, they stumble upon a shack, I guess you'd call it. It's this structure, 2-story, very simple. Luke immediately is like, I don't think we should go in there. I don't got good vibes about it. And the rest of the boys are like, what does it matter, mate? We got to get out of this rain. We need to warm up. Dom needs to rest. It's as good a shelter as any. So they go ahead and go in. It's kind of weird in there. There's a whole bunch of crosses all over the walls. It looks like no one has been in there for so many years, right? Like centuries, they're saying. They all are kind of settling in, and then Phil is like, I'm gonna go see what's upstairs. So he goes on upstairs and freaks the fuck out because upstairs there's this stuffed creature. My understanding of it, and part of this is because of the movie, is that it is a goat head with horns. It's got human hands, little human arms, equestrian legs, haunches. It's got haunches and hooves. And it's just hanging out up there. So obviously Phil freaks the fuck out. He's like, what? I was not expecting that. Right? The rest of the boys go up there, look at it. They have a bit of a laugh. Hutch is like, this is a little strange. Oh well, what choice do we have? So to make a fire, they pull down all of the crucifixes and burn them, which Luke is like, I just don't think this is a good idea. Luke is not, he's like, ugh. And then another thing that happens is that Phil and Dom are like, I gotta piss, and they piss in the house. And Phil's like, I don't know, it just feels really disrespectful. So Luke is like, I'll go ahead and go outside for all that. I'm gonna back up real quick because I forgot what happens before they see the house and why they're like why they need to shelter like that. So as they're walking in the woods, they see this animal hung up in the tree, and it's completely like dressed, like field dressed, and it's strung up in the tree. And they're like, well, animals don't do that. I don't know of a bear that does that. So they see this like animal hanging up and they're kind of freaked out. It's like, it is unnerving, and it looks kind of fresh too, which also freaks them out because, as I said, the woods are giving no one. It's a very old forest where they're like, I don't think people have been here before. And then to see this animal hanging up is alarming, to say the least. So flash forward, they're at the house, they all fall asleep. Well, they all wake up, they all have a nightmare of some sort. It's either Phil or Dom. One of them is, I think it's Phil. Phil is upstairs and he's stripped. He's like just in his underwear and he's like praying to this stuffed figure. Dom, I believe, is outside, and same thing. He's a crying mess. He's in his underwear, like freaking out. I forget where Hutch is, but like similar situation. I think Hutch is like screaming inside the house maybe. And Luke wakes up from his dream that I don't fully remember, but it's like the same kind of vibe. It's very similar. This part of the book is very similar to the movie. So if you've seen that, you know what I'm saying. Anyway, so Luke is like, get your shit together. He kind of wakes everyone up, gets them to calm down, gets them like inside the house, and is kind of like, I don't know, it just kind of gets them all to like chill a bit and calm down. The next morning, they're like, okay, we gotta go. We did not make nearly the amount of progress that we needed to. They thought that cutting through the forest would be not as difficult, but because of just how like dense it slows them down quite a bit. Plus the fact that Phil's feet are getting a lot worse, his blisters are a lot worse, and then Dom's knee is just like getting worse and worse by the day. Another thing that I think Nevill did really well in this section of the book is kind of making the forest seem really alive, in that Luke is talking about how it feels like the forest is trying to keep them in, how it's purposely getting them off track, or how it just feels like the forest is keeping them, is holding on to them and not letting them leave. I really liked that. I really liked this first section. Loved the first section. I thought it did a really good job building, like, the visuals were really great. The suspense was really good. I thought the characters were pretty strong too, especially in the kind of like alienation that Luke is feeling. I really liked that. Really liked that. If it was just the first part of this book and that was it, there was no second part, probably would have been like a 4 out of 5 stars for me. I digress. So it's the next day after they stayed in this house, and they're just, trying to make progress, trying to get out of these woods. Everyone's in kind of worse spirits because, again, they're like running out of food at this point. They've had a rough night, and 2 of them are injured. Plus, again, because of like their feelings and how poorly the trip's going, there's just a lot of like animosity going back and forth, where everyone is just kind of, they're just feeling it, So the next thing that they find in the woods is ruins of a church, they believe. And first they find a graveyard, and Hutch is talking about like there's all these runes, like Nordic runes, that are just, super, super old. Everything's stone and wood. There's nothing like remotely modern about this church that they have found. On top of that, the like just how the graves look and the gravestones, they can tell that it's like a century old church. The way the pews are, like everything about the ruins just says that it's like at least, 15, maybe 1600s, maybe. Which again just reiterates that this is an old forest. Pin in that. Hutch and Luke kind of explore inside the church, while Dom and Phil are just kind of hanging out outside of the church. Hutch ends up falling through the floor, right? So Luke comes on over, looks down, and Hutch has fallen into a whole bunch of bones. And some of them are like way older, some of them are quite new, some of them are human, some of them are animal. So that just like freaks them out even more, on top of being in this like creepy forest, seeing this animal hung up in the trees, being in this like creepy room with this like stuffed goat thing, and now seeing this creepy church with all these bones. So the urgency to get out of the forest is escalating at this point, because they're just very like on edge. People are, not doing well mentally and physically. They're running out of food. They're cold. They're wet. It's just everything's escalating. So they're walking through the woods after the church, and they're kind of talking, and Dom's kind of being a little pissed, and Luke kind of breaks and is like, I don't understand why you guys hate me so much. I don't know what I did. Y'all aren't happy in your lives. I know that for sure. He starts talking about how they're both in like very unhappy marriages, and how, just life stuff. To which Dom and Phil are kind of firing back and being like, well, at least we have wives and kids. At least we have a house. What do? You work at a record store. You rent a shitty little apartment. You haven't done anything with your life. So they get quite frustrated, and they're kind of talking to each other, snipping at each other. And Luke says, once we get out of here, we go our separate ways. And Dom's like, yeah, for fucking sure. I don't ever want to see you again. And then Dom says, we only went camping because you're so skint. Me and Fillers and H wanted to go somewhere warm, but you couldn't afford it. We were thinking Egypt for some Red Sea diving. So this is what happens when you compromise for a free spirit who lives by his own rules, who ended up selling CDs for a living and is always skint. So this is the point that Luke kind of loses it, and he ends up like pummeling Dom. Luke then kind of reveals that this isn't the first time that he's flown into such a rage and has hurt someone so violently before. Phil and Hutch end up kind of getting Luke off of him and all of that, but it's just, again, very tense. At this point, Luke is kind of thinking, he's like, I might just go off on my own, separate from the group. It's clear that the boys don't like me. Phil and Dom can't make it alone, so Hutch needs to stay with them, and I will go off. I will go get help. I will get us rescued, something. But he's like, I gotta go off on my own. And Hutch is like, right. Next morning, you go off. It'll be fine. We'll figure it out. During the night, as they're camping, Luke and Hutch have a bit of a heart-to-heart, and Hutch reveals to Luke why Phil and Dom are kind of in the moods that they're in. So Hutch reveals that Phil's wife had kicked him out of the house, and that he's had to move into his own apartment, and she is trying to take full custody of the kids, get the house, everything. It is revealed that the reason for this is because of, the recession that's going on and just financial strains going on between Phil and his wife. So that's why Phil kind of wanted this vacation and is also not in the best frame of mind. As for Dom, his wife had been going through a big depression, and it had caused a rift in their relationship, as well as some struggles that they had with their kids. One of them has asthma, ADD, and potentially autism, according to Hutch. Dom has also been struggling financially. He now has to take care of both his kids while his wife is like going through her depressive episode, and Dom is also struggling. So Luke kind of feels bad now about this, because it's kind of for both sides, Phil and Dom and Luke, kind of like realizing the grass isn't greener on the other side. Luke resented Phil and Dom for what he thought they had, the house, the wife, the kids, the whole nine, whereas Phil and Dom kind of resented Luke for what he didn't have, that he didn't have to deal with the wife and the kids and the whole nine. They kind of resented him for being like this like free spirit and not having to worry about anyone but himself. But then they both kind of realized that they don't have the happy wife and kids, and that Luke also isn't very happy either. So again, this is where Hutch really is a peacemaker between the two sides. I thought I had explained this a lot more than I actually did, but I kind of just want to reiterate really quick the dynamic that was going on between these four friends. Hutch was very much the leader, with Phil and Dom kind of being buddy-buddy below him, and Luke was very much a fourth wheel, which is why Hutch, one, knows all this information about Phil and Dom, is because he, it's really the three of them. It's like the 2.5 of them against Luke, with Hutch kind of being this, go-between. Throughout the first part of the book, Hutch really acts as a mediator between the two groups, and Luke realizes this and knows this, but he still kind of struggles with it. And I think that, I guess personally, that's something I've dealt with, so I really related to Luke quite a bit, feeling like such an outsider in a friend group that you used to feel so, connected and, in with. So I really liked this dynamic that was kind of explored in the book, but I don't know, I just felt like I needed to reiterate Hutch's role a bit more. He is very much the leader. He's keeping peace between Luke and Phil and Dom. So yeah. The boys go to sleep. It's Luke and I believe Phil in one tent, and then Dom and Hutch in the other. And they wake up and Hutch is being ripped out of that tent. He is being ripped out and dragged away. It's believed that it is from this this monster that they haven't totally seen. We get a kind of idea of the monster with this section, but the next series of noises they heard were not caused by a tree, nor could they be passed off as similar to anything they had heard before in this forest or any other forest. It was a mixture of a bovine cough and a jackal's bark, but one so deep and powerful it suggested a chest more expansive and a mouth wider than either of those comparisons. Bestial, ferocious, to be avoided. Then it was repeated, downwind of them about 20 meters steep, but not preceded or followed by the sound of movement. It was definitely animal, something big. Luke and freaking Hutch thought that they heard this sound. They heard the sound, and then Hutch is being ripped out of the tent as they were all sleeping. I also could have explained this a lot better. So when Hutch and Luke were talking the night before, after Phil and Dom were asleep, they had heard some of these weird noises, and then Phil, Dom, and Luke are awoken to Hutch being ripped out by this creature that I had described. So the next morning, it is just Phil, Dom, and Luke. So Luke kind of steps into this Hutch's shoes and is like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to get out. So he's leading them through the woods, and then he's like, we got to go back. We need supplies from the campsite. I believe they left a tent. They left some food, some stuff that, was Hutch's that he wasn't wearing when he was ripped out of the tent. So they're like, okay, we got to go back. We need the supplies. So they go back, get supplies, and then try to continue on their way. Luke is being very he's looking at his compass every 5 feet, because it feels like they need to go, I think west, but they keep going southwest or south or north or east. They just keep getting turned around. So he's eyes glued to this compass, and they end up stumbling upon Hutch. He is strewn in the tree, field dressed, the same way as the animal that they saw at the very beginning, which is very freaky, very alarming. So now it is just Luke, Phil, and Dom. They end up on a kind of hill where there's a bit of a clearing. They feel like they can make camp there. And again, at this point, Dom is not doing well. Phil is Phil's taken kind of Luke's lead, and Luke is filled in for Hutch. So Luke is like, I'm going to go climb that tree. You rest here with Dom, okay? Do not leave this clearing that we have. Stay in eyesight. Dom, if you hear anything, scream. So Luke is up in this tree, and he can see for miles, and he's like, that's where we got to go. I'm going to make sure we get that way. And as he's about to head down this tree, he hears Dom scream. Phil has been pulled into the woods by this monster. So now it is just Luke and Dom. They still have nightfall to go. And Luke and Dom are talking, and Dom's like, listen, man, I'm not getting out of here. My leg's in too rough of a shape. He's picking off the weakest of the bunch. I'm not going to make it. You leave. You get yourself out of here. If either of us are going to do it, it's going to be you. And Luke's like, okay, sure. Not happy about it, but sure. So Luke and Dom stay up through as much of the night as they possibly can. And they kind of have a heart to heart. And Dom's like, yeah, I was a bit of an asshole. And Luke is like, yeah, I didn't need to beat the shit out of you though. Sorry, bud. But they come to kind of an understanding. And that's what makes Luke not want to leave him anymore, because of this understanding that they've come to. They try to both stay up. And then, so Luke and Dom both end up falling asleep. And Luke is awoken by, just a feeling like he can sense it, that sixth sense that we all have. And he, tries to rouse Dom and wake him up. And Luke can see it. He can see into the dark and see this figure kind of coming for him. He, still is trying to wake up Dom. Dom's like out. He's like really asleep. So Luke, is like ready to fight this thing. He's on high alert. He is, ready to pounce. And he ends up throwing a rock at this creature, and it absolutely pisses the creature off. It screeches and it ends up lunging at Luke. Quote, the terrible thunk of stone on flesh was followed by a screech that deafened both of them. Luke recoiled from the throw, but before he could straighten his spine, something whipped out from the howling presence behind the tree and cracked his skull. His vision flared white with pain before his eyes, and his mind clicked off into complete darkness. Luke now has a pretty serious skull injury. When he wakes up the next, day, maybe the next morning, there's a bandage that Dom has wrapped around his head, but Luke is in really bad shape. He's clearly had a traumatic brain injury. He is concussed. He can't see out of one of his eyes. He's just not doing well. But him and Dom still have to get out of there. So they end up packing up camp, and they're like, okay, if we don't get out tonight, we're not making it. They take off and try to get through this forest. Well, as they're walking, they're struggling. They're taking breaks every, couple of steps. They're really not doing well because Dom's knee at this point is it should be amputated kind of level. Again, Luke has a serious skull fracture, probably. He talks at points about being I think my brain is exposed. That's the kind of level that we're talking about. So it's very slow going. And at some point, Luke hears a shuffling behind him and hears the smallest, quickest sound from Dom, and that's it. Before Dom is taken, they run into Phil's body, hanging in the same way as the animal and in the same way as Hutch. And at this point, they're like, why? We're not surprised. We're not surprised. This thing is hunting us. This forest wants us dead. We're not surprised. It's going to be us next. So Dom is gone, and Luke continues to, he calls out for him, and, Dom's not answering. So Luke continues to try to get through this forest. He passes out a couple times. And at one point when he passes out, he ends up basically falling into a mini coma. And that's where we're left off in part 1. I know what you might be thinking. It's what I was thinking. 3 out of our 4 main characters are dead. And there is still about 40% of the book to get through. And I know you might be wondering, what could this guy possibly be up to alone? There's no one else. This is where the book should have ended. It should have been wrapped up in another chapter or 2, and Luke should have either died or made it out. But this second part of the book is really where I have a lot of issues with the writing and the novel as a whole. If I were to give a rating on just the first part of this book, I would give it an easy 4 out of 5. I loved the atmosphere. I thought the setting was really well done. The horror elements were really good. I felt very creeped out reading this first part. I loved it. But after reading the second part, I ended up rating the book a half star out of 5. Not even a full star, just a half, because the second part of the book was just so bad. So, part 2. Luke Luke wakes up in this makeshift bed and he has no idea how long he's been out. His wounds have not really been dressed. He still has not had any kind of bath. He doesn't know where he is, what time it is, how many days he's been out, none of that. So, over the next couple of days, it's really unclear how many days pass, but he ends up meeting the people who rescued him. So, 2 boys and a girl have rescued him. And I just want to go on a little tangent real quick. I've seen a lot of reviews complaining about how Nevill wrote this female character and how it's kind of misogynistic and just gross. And while I so agree, there are bigger fish to fry in this second part. But Nevill hates fat people because part of like the characterization of Phil is that he is fat and cumbersome and an oaf kind of vibe. And he does a very similar thing to this girl as well, in that he's always talking about how big she is and how she can run really fast despite how large she is. And it's not cute. It's not cute. It's not fun. But there's worse parts than the characterization of her. So anyway, he meets his 3 captors. There's Loki, who he learns is kind of the head honcho of this group. He doesn't have honestly too much of a characterization, but he does do a lot of kind of like exposition dumping. And then the next male character is Fenris. He is kind of this like annoying kid to Luke. He's very like, it's clear that he's kind of seeking approval from Luke, and he has a lot of like energy and it's just kind of bouncing off the walls and is very excitable. And then the girl of the group is Surtur, I believe is how you would say it. And her entire personality, like I said, is that she is fat and annoying and screams and is a girl. Sorry. Luke also knows that with the 3 in this house is this old woman who is unnamed. She is very old and meek, but she is the only one who shows Luke any kind of actual kindness. So as Luke is laying here, he hears a couple different things. He hears metal music, like black metal music playing. He sees that the 3 kids are drinking, so they're having parties, they're getting drunk. He is given some water and some food, but nothing very substantial. Slowly, Luke is kind of like not healing necessarily, but he's not getting any worse because at this point, he has, like I said, this pretty massive gash in his head. He's also dehydrated, malnourished, and exhausted before all of this. So he's just not in great shape. Through the next many chapters, because there are a lot of chapters in this book, they definitely could have been condensed or done away with altogether. A couple things happen. Luke ends up taking a jug and hitting Fenris with it, and that causes Surtur to beating the crap out of him, which, you know, again, is not going to be very helpful. I'm pretty sure he like breaks a rib or 2 probably. At one point his nose gets broken and just like smashed into his face. He also realizes that they are not going to call the police. They are not going to help Luke. They are not going to go, you know, ring any alarms. They're not taking him to a hospital. They are not interested in helping Luke. Luke realizes that he's supposed to be a sacrifice for this monster that's living in the woods. Couple things about this group and things that really bothered me at this point in the story. As I've mentioned and reiterated, the entire first half of the book is talking about this ancient forest and how everything is old and it's centuries, potentially a millennia old. And then we get these kids who are very modern. They have tattoos and they're wearing band tees and they're talking about CDs and they're in a band and they play guitar and like they're drinking moonshine and they have a truck. They have a truck with gas cans and they're talking about, like I said, very modern things. So it's clear that these kids have like come into the forest, but it just really bothered me and kind of took me out of the atmosphere that was created in the first part, because it was just like, it just felt wrong that these were the people who Luke was now dealing with, not the ancient people of the forest who might still be there, not them. No, these very like modern kids who speak to him in a very modern way. Another thing about these kids that really bothered me was that they were so like stereotyped, which I think in a better novel would have been purposeful, in that Luke's first introduction to them is them all standing in a row wearing animal masks. One is a rabbit, one is a wolf, I believe, and then the other is, I want to say, a sheep. But underneath the mask, they're like in face paint and like they're wearing mascara and eyeliner. And like that also just really kind of took me out of it because it's just like, it felt like kids dressing up and trying to be something. And again, in a better novel, that would have been done really well and that would have been the purpose, but I don't think that was the purpose here. So that was annoying. They also go on these like rants and tirades about how they're just like so evil. They're just evil, evil people who do evil, evil things and they kill people. You know that they've killed people before? They've killed 9 people before. So killing Luke is just, it's whatever. And then like Luke is talking about like Christianity and he's like, we found a church out there. And I think it's Fenris. He's like, I don't even fuck with Christianity. Christianity is stupid and you're stupid for even saying it because like, fuck God, you know? But he's also like, but we're not Satanist either. We are Vikings. We believe in Odin. And it felt like such a gross misrepresentation of like the very like ancient Scandinavian and Norwegian lore that exists. Like it just felt like so, oh my God. It just felt so like I'm this man from London and I'm going to write this story and use these cultures, but not correctly. And again, if that was the purpose, sure, but I don't think that was the purpose. So the kids and the characters are just like super annoying. They are in this band called Blood Sacrifice, and at one point Luke starts to refer to the 3 of them as Blood Sacrifice, and that really bothered me too. Like a lot, because I was like, these are people who are captured you, who are literally torturing you, starving you, but you're going to go ahead and call them what they want to be called? I don't know. That just like felt weird to me. Luke is figuring out all of this and it takes entirely too long to get to these conclusions as well. 2 things happen that are like maybe kind of important. They end up bringing Luke out of his room to see Dom has also been strung up. It just felt unnecessary. Like we could have come to that conclusion ourselves. It didn't need to be an entire thing, but it was. And then the other thing that happens is that they take Luke up into the attic where there is essentially baby versions of this monster in the woods. So the people in this attic are like, they got the human hands, they got the hooves and like the haunches, and they've got like the goat faces, but they're not like, they're smaller because they can fit in an attic, but they're still supposed to be like thousands and thousands of years old, you know, because they're like, their skin is really gaunt and they're really pale and bony and fragile and all of this, but they're still alive. Other things that happen, Luke tries at one point to escape and it doesn't go well, but he does learn that there's a gun in the house and that there is in fact a truck at the house. At the point where he is going to be sacrificed, he is brought outside and crucified upside down though, because they're evil. So they don't do a regular crucifixion. They would never have a cross like this. It's got to be upside down. Sure. So he's being crucified upside down and they're like, they have this fire lit and they're like dancing. They're like, we're going to see our God, because they worship this thing in the woods, which is like, whatever. It's whatever at this point. But the old lady, we find out, she's the one who can call to this thing in the woods and she won't call to it. She's like, no, screw you guys. Luke wakes up the next morning and his hands are untied, his legs are untied, and his knife is with him. And he realizes immediately that the old lady did not call to the thing in the woods because she is being held captive in her house by the blood sacrifice group and that she needs him to kill them. So he does. It doesn't really matter what happens after this. He like stabs Fenris and slits his throat. He shoots Loki in the head, and then Surtur, he doesn't end up getting after her. We'll get back to that. So after he kills the first 2, the old lady starts to call the thing in the woods, and Luke is like, fuck you, and shoots her with the gun. And then he goes up into the attic and one by one kills all of the beings in the attic. And once he's done, he can hear the creature screaming and is basically like, hears this like sad cry because that's his, it's like children. So Luke ends up getting in this car, and in all of this, again, I just want to recount, he has half a working eye, a insane cut in his head where his brain is probably hanging out. At one point, I think he was starting to get scalped by one of the fights he was in. His nose is completely shattered. Probably has a couple broken ribs. He's malnourished, dehydrated, exhausted. He has been stabbed in his arm and his leg. And he's talking about how he's like struggling to move and all of this. Oh, he's also fucking naked. He's naked this entire time, which it's so unnecessary. He gets into this truck and manages to start it. And he's like, it shouldn't be this easy. I shouldn't be able to escape like this. And it's like, you're fucking right. You're so right. You're so correct. But whatever, because we don't know how long this truck has been sitting there. And then the truck is a stick shift, right? And Luke says that he has not driven a vehicle in years. So he would be a little rusty on stick, right? Probably stall it out like 7 times. No, he drives it just fine. Not only does he drive it just fine, you need two arms and 2 legs to drive stick, because you gotta shift your gear shift. You gotta lower the clutch and all of that. Like it's not like driving a manual or automatic. No. However, Luke is just so skilled and so good that he's able to drive this manual car while he's saying that his arms are locking up and his legs are locking up. He can't see, and he still has the shotgun, sticking out the passenger side window. But he's still able to drive. He's still able to drive and do all this. He is still able to drive and do all of this into the woods that were so dense he had to crawl on his hands and knees at points to get through the underbrush and the trees. But he's able to just drive just fine. Low key, just fine. Anyway, so the monster's like chasing him and he's driving off, and at one point the monster is like puts its like arm down on like the bed of the truck. So the truck doesn't move and Luke is like freaking out, but literally none of it matters. At one point the monster drops Socher, the girl, in the trunk, and Luke is like, damn, that's crazy. Doesn't matter. Okay, we're getting near the end. I'm so tired of talking about this book. I got kind of confused at how this like last part happened because one, I was kind of done reading it and was reading it honestly as fast as I could. But on top of that, it just didn't make sense because in my mind, I'm imagining this thing as being quite large because that's how they've been describing it. They've been describing these like really long limbs, that it's very loud, very large, very big. Luke hits it with the truck and its head goes through the windshield at Luke, like its horns and stuff. And this just really bothered me because if it's supposed to be so damn tall, then how did its head end up there? If you were to hit a moose, let's say, with your truck, I could see that happening maybe. But this thing is like larger than a moose and taller than a moose, and it's huge. So how did its head end up there? And that like takes it out too. Like Luke doesn't, I don't even remember at this point, and I literally read it less than 10 hours ago. But Luke is able to just kind of like wander out of the forest after this. He gives up on the truck, something happens to it, and he's just like, okay, and walks out of the forest. And he gets to a clearing in the woods and he's like, I did it. I'm gonna live now. I had a lot of issues with this second part of the book. One, it was entirely too drawn out. I can sum up what happened in the second part in a couple sentences and take about 5 minutes. But this second part of the book, oh my god, it took so long to read. And it just was such like a weird shift in like tone and danger. And I guess like you could argue that like, yeah, they wrap up together and the first part is needed for the second, all of that. But like they still felt like 2 very different books. And it's really frustrating because the build-up at the beginning was so good. I thought the characters were good. I thought the development that they had was pretty good. But by the time Luke is like stuck in this room, in this bed, I don't give a shit what happens to him. The more he talks, the more unlikable he becomes. You stop feeling sorry for him after all his friends die. And that's really that, because he doesn't get any better. He's just like, he's so insufferable. And so was like all the chapters where it's just like him and Loki talking to each other and Loki being like, I'm so cool and awesome. And Luke being like, well, not really. And that was it. That was the back and forth. I also had a couple other issues. It happened a couple times where I was reading this and then a sentence would just make zero sense. It was one of those things where I feel like an editor needed to go through this with like a gun to Neville's head to make him change things, because there was a lot of sentences where the sentences were just like so long and filled with a lot that nothing was totally really being said. And then there was also a lot of like times where it felt like a kid just trying to use as many big words as he could to sound smart, and it just bogs it down, you know? But specifically, there were some sentences, like I said, that made just zero sense. This is one of them. Quote, like he was so disappointed who something was over, or that he had been cheated. I don't know what that means. Like he was so disappointed who something was over. That made no sense to me. I would have DNF'd this book, and I should have, but by the time I got to a point where I was like, this book is bad and I'm tired of reading it, I had already put in so much time and energy and effort into reading it that I was like, I want to finish it just because I want to know. It's not worth finishing. I truly think that the movie is better than the book. I think the changes that it made were good. I think the fact that it ignored an entire half of this book really shows just how bad that half is. Reading a lot of the reviews I've seen, that's the biggest harp that people have with this book, is that one, the characters are annoying, and they are, and two, the second half of the book just is bad. It's like hard to even think about what else to say that I haven't already in complaining about this book. I just thought the shift in the horror elements in the second half of the book were really not great. I think it could have been so much shorter. We could have done without the entire second half. Luke turned into such an unlikable character. The modernization of the characters just really didn't sit right with me because of all the time that we spent talking about how ancient this forest was, and it just felt so out of place to have these kids talk about buying CDs and record shops and wearing fucking studs and leather pants and face makeup. And like face paint. It really bothered me. I honestly wish I never read it because it just was so not worth reading it and the annoyance. I'll just say, watch the movie. Don't read the book. The movie's better. Like a lot better. And that's so rare for a book adaptation. Last thing I want to say is that it is November, about the middle of November when I'm recording this. And a meme was on Twitter a month or two ago where someone had posted a review of The Long Walk by Stephen King, in that they said, why would you show up to The Long Walk fat and in jeans? And it kind of blew up. I think it's kind of funny. I'm going to read this to you right now. This was a quote from the book, and it is the only time in the book I ever even got close to laughing. New shoes, wrong socks. Phil's even wearing jeans today. What did you tell him? Jesus Christ Almighty. Phil showed up to the ritual fat and in jeans. Have you read The Ritual? Did you like it? It's okay if you did. Did you like the first part and not the second? Did you like the second part and not the first? Unlikely, but it's okay. I've been trying to read a lot of horror because we just, left Halloween, and horror is my favorite genre. And I've really been disappointed in the horror I've read this year. I think there's two books that I really enjoyed the horror of, and that is The Long Walk and Rosemary's Baby. And those are both quite old books. I actually own both. Let's see. I believe Long Walk was initially published for 1979. Rosemary's Baby, I believe, is a similar 1967. So these books are old enough to be my parents, and the fact that they are the best horror I've read this year out of all the horror I've read this year is really disappointing because they're like classics at this point, and I just want new modern horror to be as good as these, because I know that there's still stories out there to be told. There's still new horror stories that can be told, but it feels like no one is telling them that well. And unfortunately, The Ritual is just another example of that. It had so many good elements, but it just ended up being so bad. So thank you for listening to my rant and my review. Like I said, watch the movie. It's a lot better. Okay, bye.